Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
So glad you're with us for the Friday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. If you don't already, please subscribe to the podcast at your favorite podcast platform. And also subscribe to us at YouTube, where you can catch all our fantastic reels. And before too long, there'll be much more you can catch there from the Three Martini Lunch in terms of video. Jim, today is a special edition of the Three Martini Lunch. Early next week, we'll mark 100 days of the Trump administration, and that's the time where the media loves to do their 100-day retrospectives. And depending on the media outlet, it could be very positive, could be very negative, somewhere in the middle. So we'll do what we always do: good, bad, and crazy. You've had your own good, bad, and crazy over the first 100 days, from Ukraine to surviving Syria to surviving a high school robotics competition. So, I mean, it's been an adventure for a lot of people.
It has. And Greg, I can't believe it's been just 100 years since Trump took office. We've all aged a decade in that past amount of time. Yeah, no, it's here's the thing. There's that sense of we never know how much time we have left. I think it was Vin Scully who said he's listed his day to day, but then again, aren't we all? The Yes. Good news is, in the Trump era, we're packing a lot in a short period of time. We are doing a lot. I don't just mean me personally. It just seems like the news cycle has been stuck on fast forward for a long time. And, sometimes on this, we discuss our podcast and, we start thinking, by the time people hear it, well, the news cycle have moved on to some other grand controversy or something. But I feel pretty good that our choices will stand out for really significant moments in the first 100 days of the Trump presidency.
Hopefully not much changes by the time we actually hit the first 100 days. But yes, it's like a fire hose. And part of it's because the media is just constantly lighting their hair on fire over every little thing. So,
Greg, I hate to interrupt, but I'm just seeing over Twitter, aliens have landed. That also is just got to scrap everything we had for this. No, I'm making that up, people.
We're going to deport them, obviously. I mean, they're not coming legally.
Illegal aliens are not accepted in this country. Yeah, so.
Yeah, exactly right. So in the meantime, in today's fast-moving world, your team needs to stay connected to your customers without missed messages, communication silos, or slow phone systems. A flexible and efficient business phone system isn't just nice to have, it's essential to succeed. Enter OpenPhone.
OpenPhone is the #1 business phone system that streamlines and scales your customer communications. It works through an app on your phone or computer, so you won't have to carry around 2 phones anymore or use a landline. With OpenPhone, your team can share one number and collaborate on customer calls and texts like a shared inbox. That way, any teammate can pick up right where the last person left off, keeping response times faster than ever.
It makes your life easier. It makes everything easier for your team as well. OpenPhone is offering Three Martini Lunch listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/3ml. That's OPENPHONE.com/3ml. And if you have existing numbers with another service, OpenPhone will port them over at no extra charge. So keep those numbers. OpenPhone, no missed calls, no missed customers. All right, Jim, let's kick it off here. Trump's first 100 days, the good, the bad, the crazy, or perhaps the best, the worst, and the craziest. So what do you have at the top of your list for what was good here in the first 100 days?
Okay, so I have my main pick and a backup, just in case you pick the same thing. It's almost like our end of the year award rules in play. Head and shoulders above any other major policy change enacted by the Trump administration is what's happened at the border and what's happening regarding illegal immigration. The numbers have just plummeted like a stone. You don't hear, the numbers, we've gone from 5-figure sums and 6-figure sums through much of the Biden years. I think it was 7,000 a month ago or 2 months ago. Numbers for this month aren't out yet, but we expect these things to continue. Now, it's worth noting, in the first term of Trump, they dropped down very quickly and then kind of gradually went back up a bit. And then COVID came and then went back down again. So we'll see how things play out month by month, year by year. The coyotes, the human traffickers might say, oh, okay, the guard is down. We can try, a couple months from now. But this was a really major pressing problem. And they said there's nothing that can be done. And Biden had done everything. Well, no, very quickly. When you put Tom Homan in charge and when the president makes it very clear, you're going to get deported and there's going to be a lot more ICE raids and all that kind of stuff. Lo and behold, people self-deport. Lo and behold, people stop trying to get across the border. And it's been one resolute policy victory that the president can hold his head high about. The one thing as I'm watching this, I'm thinking about the experience of Rudy Giuliani back in the mid-'90s, where the problem of crime in New York City in the Koch and Dinkins years was terrible. And then he solved it. And then after, one of the interesting things is that the electorates have very short memories, and they don't really sit around and have a great deal of appreciation. And they, by the time Giuliani was running for Senate in 2000, the end of crime in New York City, or the dramatic decline, it was old news. Welfare reform went away. Nobody gave Republicans credit for that, after a couple of cycles. And people forget what you got right. So I almost wonder if 2, 3, 4 years from now, when illegal immigration is no longer anywhere near a top-tier public concern, Republicans will find themselves in trouble on some other issues, and they won't have this long, lingering appreciation from the elect. That's just the way American politics works. See, your victories, unfortunately, there's a reason why some people are eager to keep the problem around, to keep campaigning on it. Republicans, at this rate, won't have the issue of illegal immigration to run on. But I still think that's a really good thing, because it's better for the country as a whole if illegal immigration, it's not halted, but is dramatically reduced the way it has over the last couple months.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's the number one issue. I'll talk about my backup choice in just a second. But yes, I mean, if you look at the Southwest border encounters, I've got the site up right now. In December, 96,000 plus. In January, which 2/3 of which was still in the Biden administration, 61,448. Then you get to February. Looks like it's bumped up a little bit since the original number of 8326. It's about 11,000. And the same thing for March. I mean, it's just, it's like they just fell off a cliff, which shows it wasn't that hard to do. You just had to care about enforcing the law. Deportations have been a little bit more complicated in some cases, needing to dot the I's and cross the T's with due process. In other cases, federal judges just trying to put a stick in the bicycle spokes because they just don't like Trump being able to remove people who are criminal illegals. And it's just taking a lot longer than it should. But so that's, I think, clearly the best success of the first 100 days. But I'll also just say cultural sanity. One of the reasons, and we've talked about this pretty recently, that Trump got elected was because the Democrats were not only pushing the culture in a direction that most Americans wanted nothing to do with, they were being very, very ostracizing about it. If you didn't agree with males and women's sports, if you didn't agree that they should have access to locker rooms and dressing rooms and all that, somehow you were the weirdo. The Democrats got beat up on that big time. They still really haven't learned their lesson. They've still opposed, at least in the U.S. Senate and in the House, actually, every Democrat, I think, voting against a ban on men and women's sports. And so they're just going to keep beating themselves over the head on this issue. But Trump, through executive orders, through understanding that this is something people care about, they're tired of watching their very talented daughters have unfair losses in track and field and swimming, whatever the issue may be. It's just a matter of common sense. It's a matter of sanity. We just had a big Supreme Court debate this week about parents even having the option of pulling their kids out of discussions about LGBT materials as early as 3 years old in preschool. The left has lost its mind on this. I don't know how much time Trump spends thinking about it on a day-to-day basis, but he understands. I think that most of the American people think that that's crazy. And so all he had to do was say that, promise to do what he can to change it. We'll see if Congress can ever push it over the finish line. It's one of these other things where 2-4 years from now, if everything's back to quote unquote normal, maybe it won't be as much of a campaign issue, but really a layup politically. And Republicans have made the most of it, I think.
There was a political vacuum and Trump filled it. So yes, my backup choice, by the way, was going to be at least the early moves regarding Iran. And the Houthis, the degree to which the Iranians were telling the Houthis and their other proxy groups, don't fire at the Americans. We don't want to give Trump any excuses. The moving additional air bombers to Diego Garcia and things like that. Not loving everything I'm hearing from Witkoff about the negotiations with Iran, but that is still in process as we tape this. So I'll hold off on that. But early moves indicated that there was a good, effective deterrent effect on the Iranians, or at least with the messages they were sending to their proxies.
When it comes to immigration and other issues, who can you trust in the media? Well, one of the smart things might be to go to a place where you can kind of see how a bunch of different sources cover the same story, from the left, from the center, from the right, and then understand where those arguments are coming from and then figure out what's actually going on. And that's where Ground News comes in. We've talked all week about the example of Chris Van Hollen, the senator from Maryland, going down, grandstanding to a large extent, but also meeting with Abrego Garcia. The left in the media saying he's standing up to the tyranny of Donald Trump. The right saying that he's ignoring the fact that this guy is a alleged wife beater and an MS-13 gang member. Why don't we incorporate that into the debate, please? And so you've got Ground News, which will offer diverse perspectives and avoids manipulative algorithms and gives you a fuller picture of the news.
With Ground News, you get details about the source of your information, including if the news outlet has a political bent, how reliable their reporting is, and who owns them, empowering you to compare how different news sources from around the world cover the same story. Expand your view of the news by signing up for the Ground News account and get access to the mobile app, the website, the browser extension, and exclusive newsletters so you can have a well-rounded view of the world. Think critically about what you read and find common ground between perspectives.
Visit groundnews.com/martini today to get 40% off the Ground News Vantage plan and get access to all of their news analysis features. That's groundnews.com/martini for 40% off the Ground News Vantage plan for a limited time only. All right, Jim, on to our second martini here in our special on the first 100 days of the Trump administration. Let's take a look at the negative news. What are the worst things that happened for this administration in the first 100 days? What tops your list?
Regular listeners will probably not be shocked. There was a decent amount of competition for this. But again, I think there's one that was head and shoulders, the tariff rollout. And I am among those who's generally a free trader. I think you can make a very strong case for higher tariffs on China. I am supportive of the idea that, to paraphrase Gwyneth Paltrow, we need to consciously uncouple economically from China. Giving them most favored nation status way back during the Bill Clinton years. We've now had 20-some years to look at this. It has done more to bring China's values to the U.S. than to bring American values to China. It has not deterred Chinese aggression. It has not stopped a crackdown in Hong Kong. It's not been good for the Uyghurs. It's not. Oh, and then there was this little thing called the global pandemic that we, strongly suspect came from a lab leak. So there's not a reason to support tariffs on China. There's too many. There's a plethora of reasons for that. But I don't think it helped to do this on the entire world simultaneously, including an island that was full of penguins. I'm open to the idea that these penguins have been stealing jobs from Americans, and it's time to drop things. I don't even know what penguins make, but Opus, you've had this coming to you, You already saw a not immediate rollback, but a pretty quick rollback in which they recognized that, because somebody had not retaliated, Trump was going to take it down to 10% for everybody, except for China and also except for Canada and Mexico. We run a trade surplus with Australia. So it never made sense, this idea that somehow we were getting screwed over by the Australians. There were a whole bunch of countries that really didn't deserve this. And I really think that if you're going to try to make a concerted effort to limit the aggressive expansionist power of China, well, then you want to be on good terms with Japan and South Korea and the Philippines and the Thailand and Vietnam and Australia and a whole bunch of these countries that are important. By ourselves, I'm not sure we necessarily have the leverage we want against China. Us and all of our Asian allies, not just militarily, but economically, well, then we do have a lot more leverage when it comes to facing down China. So I think that was a really giant unforced error. I think it just demonstrates the muddled thinking. We've heard the argument about having a team of rivals was what Lincoln's cabinet was called. Then there was Chris Sims, who wrote a book about his experience in Trump's first term, and he called it a team of vipers. The idea they're always constantly backstabbing each other. One of these weekends, I believe it was Navarro was on Bartiromo's show and saying, well, the great thing about these tariffs is that they're permanent. This is not a negotiating tactic. This is how we're going to raise revenue to pay for tax cuts going on. At the exact same time, Kevin Hassett, the chairman of the Council of Economic Advisors, was saying the great thing about these tariffs is they are a negotiation. They're not permanent. They're bringing people to the table, and we're going to have lower tariffs all around. Two administration advisors giving completely different explanations for why we were doing this, kind of contradictory. And I just go as a demonstration of the fact that I don't think everybody's singing from the same songbook. I don't think that, and I don't think it's good for the president. I don't think it's good for the administration. And hey, it's really not good for the markets. I hope you haven't looked at your 401k these last couple of months. As of this recording, the expectation is that GDP for the first quarter is going to be negative 2.2. Not a recession by itself, but not a great start. Yeah, 20 days of that are Biden, but I don't think you can really get Trump off the hook for this. This clearly is the markets responding to this. Manufacturers, you've seen layoffs in places like Volvo North America and Mac and places like that. it just created a whole lot of uncertainty in the economy, and that's not good on a whole bunch of fronts. So, on the China stuff, I understand what the president's trying to do. I just kind of feel like he's going about it the wrong way. On a whole bunch of other countries, this created a monkey wrench into the gears of the U.S. economy. I'm hoping the effects are short-lived, but kind of remains to be seen and not looking great right now, Greg.
Yeah, and there's still several days left in April, so this projection could change. But I've also seen that this could be the worst market month in April since 1932. And I don't know if you're a fan of history, Jim, but you don't want to be compared to 1932.
Very Norm Macdonald-y there, Greg. Yes,
Yes, that was the intent. And yes, you don't want to have your market performance compared to pretty much the heart of the Great Depression. Just a tip. But you do have some time to turn it around. But people's opinions of where the economy is get baked in much further back from Election Day than you think. Think about inflation. It was worst in 2021, 2022. For some reason, it didn't hurt the Democrats that much then, but it was still very much on the minds of everybody because their prices hadn't come down, of course, in 2024, even though the month-to-month, year-over-year number was looking better. People knew they were paying a whole lot more. They didn't like it. They blamed the Democrats for it, as they should have. And just regardless of who's in power, if people think the economy stinks, the party in power is going to pay. So if it doesn't turn around quickly, buckle up, Republicans. But on to mine, and it's similar. It's a little bit related to the tax deal and the effort to make those previous Trump administration tax cuts permanent. There hasn't been a lot accomplished in this Republican Congress so far. Yes, there's a narrow majority in the House. For a long time, it was, like 218 to 214 or 215. You really could only absorb one or two Republican defections. Right now, it's 220 to 213. We finally filled those House seats in Florida, and a couple of Democrats have passed away. And then, of course, in the Senate, you've got the filibuster. So there's not much that Republicans can ram through by themselves unless there's reconciliation involved, which there will be on this tax bill. And hopefully there's a big border security and immigration policy attachment to that as well. But Punchbowl pointing out, Jim, that Trump has only signed 5 bills into law so far, 3 Congressional Review Act resolutions overturning Biden-era regulations, the Lake and Riley Act, and the stopgap funding bill to keep the government open. And so when you've got one party controlling, even with narrow margins and procedures like the filibuster that can trip you up a little bit, I don't see a lot moving well. I don't see a lot going through the pipeline. And I'm normally not that much of a critic of legislatures not being in session. In fact, there's the great quote from the lawyer back in the 1860s in New York saying, "No man's life, liberty, or property are safe while the legislature is in session." But as long as you've got the levers of power, and there's a decent chance you're not going to have it, at least in the House after the midterms, strike while the iron is hot. There's a lot of issues where you can get meaningful stuff done. And I don't even see a lot of stuff moving through. There was this thing on Twitter in the last several days that House hasn't even been in session. I'm not sure if they define that as on the floor or at all for 85 of the first 110 days of the year. If it's not exactly that, it's certainly true that there hasn't been a lot moving in terms of important legislation to provide tax relief or extend tax relief to the American people and other things that people voted for last year.
Yeah. And let's point out Lake and Riley Act, that was right after Trump took office, right? A couple of days.
So it was actually passed before he took office, but
that's right. Yeah.
They held it. Yeah.
Look, I suspect a portion of this is the idea, not putting all your chips, pushing you to the middle of the table and betting them all on reconciliation. But if anything can be, if anything is ruled as being handling only economic and finance issues, then it probably goes into that. So yeah, if and when they ever get the reconciliation passed, that will be a huge deal. But having said that, the more time that goes by, it feels like the stakes get higher. And, with those margins, God forbid you have, a handful of House Republicans decide, well, we're not going to do it, or you're scheduled for a Monday, the flight gets delayed, a bad flu outbreak. There's just all kinds of things that could, a stuck elevator, never have more than 3 House Republicans get in the same elevator at one time. That's just a safety precaution. But yeah, you'd like to see more legislation moving through the pipeline and getting to the president's desk. And we'll see what happens. But there's certainly time to make up for this, but a little underwhelming aspect of the first 100 days.
The 100th day comes in late April, and late April is also the time that you want to be on the ball when it comes to making sure that your flower bed, your garden, and new plants in your home are where they need to be. And Fast Growing Trees is the biggest online nursery in the United States with thousands of different plants and more than 2 million happy customers. That's because Fast Growing Trees offers a wide selection of plants, easy online ordering, quick delivery, and expert support, including landscaping advice and their Alive and Thrive guarantee.
Whether you're looking to add privacy, shade, or natural beauty to your yard, Fast Growing Trees has in-house experts ready to help you make the right selection, with plant experts on call to offer growing and care advice. You can talk to a plant expert about your soil type, landscape design, how to take care of your plants, and anything else you need. No green thumb required.
That's really important because I have 0 green thumbs. And so to see those plants arriving healthy and brightening up the room or brightening up the front of your house or your backyard is always a treat. This spring, get up to 50% off select plants at fastgrowingtrees.com/martini. Plus, use the code Martini at checkout for an extra 15% off your first purchase. Visit fastgrowingtrees.com/martini and use the code Martini. Now is the perfect time to plant. Offer valid for a limited time. Terms do apply. fastgrowingtrees.com/martini. All right, Jim, we've talked about the good, we've talked about the bad, and there's also no shortage of crazy. So what's the craziest thing you've seen over the first 100 days?
Well, I really thought about Mike Waltz accidentally adding Jeffrey Goldberg to a signal chat about the strikes on the Houthis, the tirade against Zelensky in the Oval Office, J.D. Vance getting in just under the deadline to meet Pope Francis. I've heard the really, awful joke going around that, one of the Pope's advisors saying, come on, would it kill you to meet with J.D. Vance? But really, I think I'm going to go actually on the other side of the aisle. And I kind of feel like one of the craziest political developments we've seen over the last 100 days was the fear of the government shutdown. Republicans get the bill through. Schumer has the opportunity to filibuster it and chose not to, recognizing that the Democrats would likely get blamed for the shutdown. This was when Democrats were saying the Trump administration and Doge are being unfair and illegal and are oppressive to government workers. Therefore, we are shutting down the government and sending all the government workers home. That just would not going to make any sense whatsoever. So Schumer, folded. You can either lose quickly or lose slowly, and he chose to lose quickly on this fight and chose to fight another day. Man, the entire progressive left just exploded in rage at him when he really didn't have any better cards to play. He could have, he could have shut down the government, then they'd be in worse shape. And then, after X number of days or a week or 2 weeks, they would have ended up having to capitulate, fund the government under the Republican terms anyway, and then have an even worse loss. And yet somehow, lots of Democrats decided the problem was not the circumstances they're in. To give the Democrats credit, nobody ever expected House Republicans to stay unified. Wait, even Mike Johnson was, we could do that? Really? We could, how are we not having the House Freedom Caucus lousing this up by holding out? No, everybody's hung together. They got it passed. And the Democrats really had no leverage whatsoever. And so I just kind of feel like the degree to which Democrats decided, don't get me wrong. I'm not going to stand here and tell you that Chuck Schumer is a whirling dervish of raw political charisma or a particularly great leader of the Senate. But it's also that this is what life is like when you're in the minority. And I think there was just kind of this degree which the shock of Democrats, yes, it's a narrow house, but when Republicans hold together, they can get stuff passed. You can only use the filibuster when you know you're not going to get blamed for not passing things. Government shutdown fights never work out well. Really, I'd argue for either party, but the Democrats were positioning themselves to get more, and they don't have the White House, and Republicans don't fear the media the way they used to. So there's no ammo. There's no sticks. There's no, they're just kind of stuck there. And it was just kind of fascinating to watch. And I still think there's a perception, this is the last couple of years Chuck Schumer's in charge. And all of a sudden there's a lot more buzz about AOC running for president or running to challenge Schumer or something like that. It's really bizarre to see the way the Democrats have responded to being in the minority and the degree in which they're talking themselves into believing, well, the problem was we weren't just left-wing enough. And if we just go further to the left, then we'll come roaring back in 2026 and 2028.
Mine's a little bit more on the sillier side, Jim. I do think the Democrats freaking out about everything is certainly crazy. I mean, literally everything the president does. But one of the things that Trump ordered, which doesn't seem to be something the president usually cares about a lot, is that he decided to take over the Kennedy Center, which is the big performing arts center in D.C. If you ever go there, you get the program and you'll see that all the former first ladies are like the honorary chairs or whatever. And so I was sitting down to dinner with my family shortly after this happened. And I'm not even sure my wife, who's a big fan of musicals, we've been to the Kennedy Center many times, had heard the news. And so I said, did you hear that Trump took over the Kennedy Center? And so I explained how the reason he did it is because he thought there was too much woke stuff happening there. And so there'll be a difference in the type of shows that are put on. And so I just said off the top of my head, wait till the debut of MAGA the Musical. And so I don't know exactly what's going to be involved in MAGA the Musical. The phrase that immediately came out of my mouth at the time, and I haven't added any lyrics since then, is just, we're going to make America great again. Then I decided we need to do the whole story of Trump, really from the escalator on up. And let's just say it's still very much a work in progress that'll never actually get done. But because my daughters are big Taylor Swift fans, I'm like, all right, I don't know a lot of Taylor Swift songs, but I do know at least a little bit, at least how it goes, Shake It Off. And so we've decided that Shake It Off will turn into Lock Her Up. And so that will be from the 2016 campaign. And the early lines are, Hillary's a crook. You won't believe all she took. And then it goes on and on from there. And so lock her up, lock her up. So anyway, I don't know if it'll ever happen. I may have just given Rick Grinnell an idea that will turn into reality since he's running the place now. We will see. I just thought that was an interesting decision by Trump, and just curious to see what he would consider Kennedy Center worthy entertainment.
And apparently Trump really, is very invested in what happens at the Kennedy Center, way more than you think a guy who's getting the intelligence briefing every morning would have other things on his mind, but fine, whatever. Greg, I love the idea, and I'm picturing something for the second act, something operatic. Tariffs, I'm going to impose tariffs. Something like the Phantom of the Opera, something very sweeping and grand and, kind of ominous and, deep, deep, the cellos, on that. So, yes. We'll work on that someday, or get the South Park guys on it. I'm sure they've done musicals.
That's right. Get something for the Soleimani strike, and just there's all sorts of scene opportunities.
Like a dog, yes. He died like a dog.
Yes, Baghdadi,
barking, begging, woofing like a dog. That's kind of almost a rap. I can almost see it.
It's like Hamilton style there. Yeah. So, all sorts of potential. You're welcome. You're welcome, Mr. President. So anyway, Jim, have a great weekend. I'll see you on Monday.
See you Monday, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the podcast. If you don't already, tell your friends about us as well. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. They matter a lot to us, and we appreciate them. Also, get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Also, follow us on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific weekend, and join us again Monday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.